Sure. Here's the expanded part 1 of the story. Modestly dressed black woman kicked out of dealership. Next day, her dad arrives in Rolls-Royce, in 2,000 human written words, with rich detail and realism, as requested. The sun hung high over the city of Atlanta, casting its golden heat across glass buildings and spotless sidewalks. A light summer breeze did its best to soften the sharp heat, but it was no match for the glaring sunbeams bouncing off the windows of Goldline Auto Luxury Cars, one of the most prestigious car dealerships in the state. It was the kind of place where the staff wore suits, the floor gleamed like a dance stage, and the cheapest vehicle cost more than the average person's yearly salary. Into this glittering fortress of luxury walked a woman who didn't quite match the surroundings. Her name was Imani Harris. She was 27, tall with warm brown skin, high cheekbones, and large, thoughtful eyes that carried both gentleness and focus. Her hair was tucked into a neat bun, and she wore a long gray skirt, a simple white blouse, and old but polished loafers. No flashy jewelry, no designer handbag, just a well-worn leather satchel slung over one shoulder. She paused before entering, taking a slow breath. She wasn't nervous, not exactly, but aware. She had never been one to care much for appearances, and yet, she was well aware of how much they mattered in places like this. Still, she had a mission. She had done her research. She knew exactly what she was looking for: the new Voltique E7 electric SUV, one of the safest and most sustainable luxury vehicles on the market. It would be perfect for both personal use and the green energy company she was building with her 2 closest friends from grad school. They had recently secured early-stage funding, and Imani, the COO and chief engineer, had saved for months to buy this car outright. No financing, no lease, full price in hand. As the doors of the dealership hissed open and the cool blast of air conditioning hit her face, Imani held her head high. Inside, the dealership was cathedral-like. High ceilings with modern light fixtures, minimalist furniture, white marble floors, and massive posters of smiling models standing beside high-end cars. It was immaculate. Salesmen, mostly older white men in crisp blazers, stood like sentinels, eyeing each customer carefully, calculating their wallets by their watches, their status by their shoes. Imani stepped up to the front desk. The receptionist, a young woman with sleek hair and manicured nails, barely looked at her. "Hi there," Imani said warmly. "I called yesterday to ask about a test drive for the Voltique E7. I was told I could come by today." The receptionist glanced down at a tablet, then back up at her. "We don't usually do walk-ins for that model, ma'am," she said without a smile. "It's by appointment only. I made a note, spoke to a man named Brian or Blake, I think. He said if I came around this time, someone could assist me." "Let me check," the receptionist said with a sigh, as if Imani had already caused inconvenience. After a moment of scrolling, the receptionist stood and waved over a man across the room. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, tanned skin, dressed sharply but with a casual air of superiority. He walked over with an easy swagger, his eyes already scanning Imani like she was a statistic. "Blake Hendricks," he said, extending a hand loosely. "You asked about the E7. "Yes," Imani replied, shaking his hand. "I'm very interested. I've done a lot of research and would like to see the model you have in stock." Blake looked her up and down, not in the way a person looks at another, but in the way someone sizes up an object. His eyes darted to her shoes, her satchel, the lack of jewelry, the absence of designer anything. A flicker of something, maybe judgment, maybe amusement, crossed his face. "We don't usually take the E7 out for just anyone," he said, crossing his arms. "It's a premium model, very limited inventory." "I understand," Imani replied calmly. "But I was told it would be fine. And I'm ready to make a purchase today." "Uh-huh," he said, unconvinced. "You said you have financing lined up, or?" "I have the full amount. I can pay today." Blake smirked lightly. "Cash. Bank transfer," Imani replied. The smirk didn't leave his face, but his eyes turned slightly colder. "Well," he said, voice lowering like he was delivering a hard truth, "we get a lot of people who say that. They want to sit in the car, take a selfie, maybe feel like a buyer for a day. But this is a high-level dealership. We don't entertain fantasy rides. It wastes time." The words landed like a slap. Imani blinked, caught off guard. She wasn't naive, she'd grown up in a world where these kinds of judgments happened all the time. But there was something especially sharp about being accused of playing pretend. Something especially condescending about the way Blake stood there, arms folded, daring her to prove she belonged. "I don't want a fantasy ride," she said slowly, trying to keep her tone steady. "I want to make a purchase. Today. For the E7. I'm not here to waste your time." Blake's smile was tight. "And what kind of work do you do, if you don't mind me asking?" "I'm an engineer. I co-founded a green energy company," she said, hoping that would add weight to her presence. "Right," he said, clearly not believing her. "Well, I just think, maybe something pre-owned might be a better fit for what you're looking for. We have a great selection down the road. Sister company of ours. Honest folks." "I didn't ask for something pre-owned," Amani replied, her voice sharpening. "I came here. I called. I was invited. You're assuming I can't afford this car because of how I look. You haven't even asked for my ID, or proof of funds." He shrugged. "I've been doing this a long time. I can tell who's serious." "Apparently not," she said, shaking her head. "You just made a very expensive mistake." She turned on her heel and walked out. The receptionist didn't meet her eyes. Neither did the two other salesmen who had stopped mid-conversation to watch the interaction. The whole room had fallen silent for those few minutes, and Amani could feel the weight of all the invisible judgment pressing down on her as the doors slid open behind her and the heat of the sun struck her face. Her chest tightened as she walked back to the street. She could feel her eyes prickling. Not from shame, but from the rage of being dismissed. Not because she lacked money. Not because she lacked intelligence. Not even because she'd done something wrong. Just because she didn't look like someone they were used to taking seriously. She wanted to scream, to cry, to call out every ugly assumption they had thrown at her with their eyes and words. But instead, she clenched her jaw, walked with dignity to the bus stop, and sat down quietly. It wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated. But maybe it would be the last time they would underestimate her. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over the contact labeled simply, "Dad." He had always told her that no matter how humble she dressed, no matter how softly she spoke, she carried royalty in her blood. He'd built his empire from nothing. Taught her never to show off. Taught her never to fight small battles, but to win them in silence. She didn't want him to fix it. But she needed him to know. She dialed his number. He picked up on the first ring. "Would you like to continue with?" "Certainly." Here is part 2 of the story. Modestly dressed black woman kicked out of dealership. Next day, her dad arrives in Rolls-Royce, fully expanded into approximately 2,000 human-written words, told in a natural storytelling voice and continuing directly from the tone and pacing of part 1. The next morning began in stillness. The sky was a perfect canvas of soft blue, the kind that held the promise of new beginnings. In a quiet suburb just outside the city, Amani sat at the kitchen counter in her father's house, nursing a cup of black coffee. Her laptop was open but untouched. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that man's voice again, "We don't entertain fantasy rides." The words circled her mind like vultures. Her father entered the room, tall and composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit that fit him like it had been stitched by destiny. Langston Harris was a name that meant something in the business world. Once a teenage janitor scrubbing diner floors, now the founder of Harris Renewable Holdings, one of the most respected black-owned green energy companies in the country. Yet, despite all that power and legacy, he still woke up at 5 a.m. every morning, still ironed his own shirts, still looked at his daughter like she was the only thing that truly mattered in this world. He moved quietly, pouring himself tea, watching her over the rim of his cup. "You're not yourself," he said. Amani sighed. "You know how I went to the dealership yesterday?" "I do. They treated me like trash, Daddy." Before I even finished a sentence. The guy barely looked at me before pushing me out the door. Told me to try a used lot down the road. Langston didn't flinch. He set his tea down and leaned against the counter. "I'm sorry that happened to you. It's not the first time," she whispered. "But it's the last time they'll do it to you. I don't want you to fight my battles," she said quickly. "You taught me better than that." Langston smiled softly. "You fought yours. Now I'll fight mine." She looked up, puzzled. He didn't elaborate. Instead, he tapped his watch, finished his tea, and stepped away. Amani didn't know exactly what he had planned, but she knew her father. He didn't raise his voice. He raised standards. He didn't believe in revenge. He believed in reminders, reminding the world that dignity and humility were not signs of weakness but quiet strength. At exactly noon, the Rolls-Royce Cullinan glided out of the garage like a king preparing for court. Jet black with silver trim, it shimmered under the sunlight. Langston rarely drove it. He said it was a distraction from the work that mattered. But today, he wasn't just making a visit, he was making a statement. The dealership stood exactly where it had stood yesterday, arrogant as ever, with its polished marble and smug glass exterior. Business as usual. Employees walked confidently, customers browsed with gleaming eyes. The same salesman, Blake, was mid-conversation with a middle-aged couple when he noticed the black vehicle pull into the front circle of the dealership. His voice trailed off. Every head turned. The vehicle came to a slow, deliberate stop. The driver's door opened with grace. Out stepped Langston Harris. He didn't need to speak. His suit, the gleam of the rolls, the way he carried himself, it all shouted what words couldn't. I am a man who commands rooms and buys buildings with a phone call. The receptionist's jaw dropped slightly. She scrambled to her feet. Good afternoon, sir. Do you have an appointment? Langston didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on Blake, who now stood by the sports car, his posture stiffening with each second. Langston walked forward, slow and steady, his gait like a man who had never been rushed in his life. He stopped just before Blake and stared into his eyes. You're the one, Langston said. Aren't you? Sir, I'm not sure what this is about, but if you're interested in one of our... You dismissed my daughter. Blake blinked. Excuse me. Yesterday. Young black woman. White blouse. Gray skirt. Natural hair. You told her to go to a used lot. Blake's face paled. Sir, there's some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. I raised my daughter to walk with grace. To not announce her value. She came here with a full down payment, ready to buy the E7. She walked in with dignity. She walked out with humiliation. Because of you. The room had gone still. Langston reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek phone. He tapped it and turned the screen toward Blake. On it was security footage from the dealership's parking lot, paired with an audio recording of Blake's interaction with Amani. Langston didn't need to say how he got it. The dealership had cameras. All Langston needed was a contact, and he had plenty. Blake's face went sheet white. I didn't know, he began. No, Langston interrupted. You didn't know. You didn't care. Because she didn't look like money to you. You judged her by her shoes, her skin, her silence. You saw what you wanted to see. The manager appeared from a side office, his eyes darting from Langston to Blake. Mr. Harris, please, allow me to. I'll make this simple, Langston said, not looking away from Blake. I'll be purchasing 2 Voltique E7s today. One for my daughter. One for her company. But not through him. The manager straightened quickly. Of course. Absolutely. I'll personally assign someone. And one more thing, Langston added, voice cool. I could buy this dealership right now. I could replace the name on the building before your staff's next lunch break. But I won't. Because it's not about ownership. It's about accountability. He turned to the staff who had begun to gather quietly in the background. Every single person who looks like my daughter deserves to walk into a place like this and be treated with respect. Period. Not based on what they wear, or how they speak, or what car brought them in. But because they're human. The room stood in silence. Langston paused. Then, calmly, he placed a black leather folder on the counter in front of the manager. 2 orders. Paid in full. My driver will pick them up when they're ready. He turned to leave, but paused once more. And someone better deliver my daughter's keys with an apology. She didn't ask for any of this. But she earned everything. He walked back outside. The Rolls-Royce door opened for him as if guided by divine timing. As it pulled away from the dealership, the silence inside the showroom remained heavy, almost sacred. Blake remained frozen for a long moment, before slowly backing away from the counter, the weight of his arrogance finally settling in. He didn't speak, didn't argue, because he knew. Back at the house, Amani was in the garden, watering the mint and thyme her grandmother had once planted. When she heard the crunch of tires in the driveway, she wiped her hands on a towel and turned toward the door. Langston stepped inside, setting his cufflinks straight. She raised an eyebrow. You went, didn't you? He nodded once. She sighed. I told you not to. He smiled. You told me not to embarrass you, he said. I didn't. I just reminded them who you are. Amani laughed softly, shaking her head. You didn't buy the dealership, did you? No, he said. That would have been too easy. I just bought the cars. She blinked. Cars. One for you. One for your company. Full price. Paid this morning. Your keys will arrive by 5. She stepped forward, slowly wrapping her arms around his waist. You didn't have to do that. No, he agreed. But I wanted to. Because every time someone tries to shrink you, I want them to see just how big you really are. They stood there, father and daughter, bound by blood, brilliance, and the silent scars of generations before them. Outside, the sun shone over the street. Somewhere across town, a showroom stood quieter than usual, learning the hard way that humility is not invisibility, and that real power doesn't scream. It arrives silently, wearing grace like armor, and sometimes it drives a Rolls-Royce.